Last week on Mass Appeal, we showed you foods that you could eat to lower your cholesterol, and today we're going to show you what foods that you need to avoid. And as always, we're joined by 22 News registered dietitian Nancy Dell. Nancy, so nice to see you. Thank you so much for letting us here into your house. So now you have a bunch of foods that we need to avoid, and we had to look really hard to find them because you don't have them in your house.
That's right. I don't really have many of them here. But the main thing, the first thing, is you want to avoid hydrogenated oils. Hydrogenated oils are commonly called trans fat. But when you look at a label that says trans fat and you see a 0, you have to really look beyond that. 0 trans fats means that there's less than half a gram of trans fat per serving. But if the serving size is small, like take for example a tablespoon of coffee creamer, you know, those fancy flavored ones, okay? If a tablespoon is all you use, then that might be okay, but many people will use more than 1 tablespoon. In fact, and then the hydrogenated oil certainly adds up. So you want to look beyond that label that says no trans fat. Look at the ingredients and look for foods that have no hydrogenated oil in the ingredients. This is your #1 food to really avoid in order to lower your cholesterol. In a Harvard study of 200 women, they were able to increase the risk of heart attack when they had just 1.6 grams of trans fat a day.
And that's not a lot if you think about it. That coffee creamer or that animal fat, that'll do it to you.
Yeah, increased your risk 300% of a heart attack. You know, so you're going to find these in things like microwave popcorn. A serving is 1 cup. It says no trans fat. There's a lot of hydrogenated oil in there. If you eat the whole bag, you could be getting...
everybody does.
Right. You could be getting 10 grams of hydrogenated oil or trans fat.
Okay.
The coffee creamer is another great place to look. I had a client who came in and said, I don't know why my LDL went up from, my bad cholesterol, went up from 90 to 150. She told me what she ate, and I said to her, it's your fat-free creamer. And she said, fat-free creamer? I said, it's not really fat-free. In 1 tablespoon, there's less than half a gram of fat, and that fat is in the form of hydrogenated oil. She would use about 3 tablespoons in a cup of coffee and have a couple cups a day.
And that'll do it.
Right. We figured she was getting about 4 grams of trans fat a day. And when she cut it out in 1 month, she lowered her LDL cholesterol from 150 to 90.
That's
with
tremendous.
That one change.
So really you just need to look down and kind of break your diet down, because there's a lot of things like those silent killers. You never think that the creamer is going to be the thing that does it.
Right, and that one thing can make such a difference. You know, so look beyond those labels that say the trans fat, look at the ingredients, no hydrogenated oil whatsoever.
Now we have a bunch of other things here that if you cut them out or limit them from your diet, it should be a little helpful. And the first one is milk. Okay,
so these are just things that represent saturated animal fat, okay?
Gotcha.
I don't have any whole milk. 1% milk is probably fine, but you want to look at labels and you want to reduce your saturated fat. A dietitian can tell you exactly how much for you. It will vary with your body weight and your activity level and such.
But you don't want to do the whole milks and the creamers. You want to kind of get down to the 1% or the skim somewhere in there.
Ideally. But think that once you know your saturated fat budget, your animal saturated fat budget, then if you really liked a little bit of butter, you can spend it on a little bit of butter and still stay within the budget. Let's just say, for example, I tell you, you can have 12 grams of saturated fat a day. Well, you would get a tablespoon would be 7 grams for butter. But if you said, I want to use a teaspoon, it just adds a lot of flavor to my favorite vegetable, then I'd say, okay, you know, if a teaspoon is just going to be 2.5 grams around that, then you can spend 2.5 of your 12 on that if you choose.
It's all about being accountable to yourself. If you know your limits and you can budget it, then you're all set.
Right, but your saturated animal fats come from whole milk foods, so milk, butter, cheese. Also from your fatty animal foods. Now, you're not going to have to give up all meats, and these are relatively lean, but your fatty animal foods as well, like your meat, fish, would be okay, but poultry that has skin on it, you know, so you need to know how much saturated fat is in there. Meats were supposed to have labels in January of 2012. It never happened. I don't really know why.
Really?
A good story we could do probably.
I'm going to write my congressman.
Right, but you can check online, and you know, we have lists that people can, you know, use to see how much is in there. So you can always budget for things, but you want to know that those animal foods are going to be the ones with saturated fat that you have to avoid. Now, there's saturated fat in some plant foods. Coconut oil, palm oil, and cocoa butter. Okay? Now, Those are plant-saturated fats. The newer research is showing that those don't really have an adverse effect on your bad cholesterol. So you can have some dark chocolate. You could use some hard coconut oil. And palm kernel oil is also going to be in a lot of foods now because it's hard at room temperature, like a saturated fat, but it doesn't seem to have a bad effect on your LDL. But most often, you want to use oils. You want to use plant oils when you're cooking and avoid all the saturated fats.
So your grapeseed oils and all those kinds of oils, your olive oils.
Your grapeseed oil, your olive oil, your non-GMO canola oils would also be good. And, you know, safflower oil, there's been some good studies to show that might help with belly fat. So, you know, as long as you have a variety of plant oils, those would be better.
I think if I can take anything from this, it's to really kind of know your limitations and get smart about your food, because you can have a little bit of butter, you can have some milk, as long as you can plan it in throughout your day.
Right. Everybody has a budget for how much they can have. Just stay in your budget and enjoy some of your favorites.
It's not about cutting it out, it's about knowing about them enough.
Yep.
Nancy, thank you so much. It's a pleasure being in your home. And if you want to watch this segment again, you can always log on to mymassappeal.com.